flash of relief dart across his face when she declined his offer, and found herself feeling a pang of sympathy for the man. This was unlikely to be the last battle they fought for him. Their saddlebags full and their horses rested, they began the ride east, back to the region of Pontus and their citadel home, Themiscyra. The journey to the edge of the Black Sea would take 2 days, at a leisurely pace. If needed, they could ride at a gallop, and without stopping unless it was unavoidable. That was the way they had ridden to reach here. But the women and the horses had earned a little respite. Blue skies, littered with feather-like clouds that hovered motionless in the still air, stretched above them as they rode. On a clear day like today, from its southernmost point, they could see all of Anatolia. To the north, beyond the Sea of Marmara, was Thrace, and west across the Aegean lay Thessaly and Athens. They had travelled to these places and further still. They had travelled to Thebes and the Peloponnese, called to fight for kings who might otherwise have lost their lands, called to rain their arrows on armies with whom they had no quarrel. And they had been paid handsomely for it. Sometimes the battles would come one after another, and they would race from one beleaguered land to the next, always ready, always victorious. But for now they were headed home to rest, basking in the scent of the ferns that littered the hillsides around them. The women chattered as they rode. There was always a rush that came after battle. The adrenaline that had lent them such force and ferocity now drew words from their lips as quickly as the blood had spilled from their enemies. Such exuberant conversation between her women might endure for miles, over plains and through valleys, across rivers and around grand lakes. Yet inevitably, at some point before the sun set on that first day after a battle, a quiet would descend, in which they recalled those they had lost, those that had been granted the most honourable of deaths, a warrior's death, an Amazon's death. 4 women made their first kill today. It was Antiope who spoke to the Queen through the quiet. 4 who can ride with us to the Gagarians next spring. That is good news. I will meet with them personally upon our arrival home. Shortly after they halted at a shallow lake that had survived the droughts of summer, shingle shimmered beneath the surface as the women knelt to wash the blood and grime from their skin, and watched as swirls of red eddied from their palms. While Hippolyte and her sisters considered Themiscyra their home, this was not the case for all Amazons. Certainly most dwelt within the city walls, with the luxuries and protection provided by so many warriors living in close proximity. But there were those who found such a life constrictive and claustrophobic. These nomads spent their time outside of battle, wandering the steppes and camping out beneath the stars. They hunted with bow or spear, preferring to make small fires and pick the meat from the bones of the birds and beasts they had caught. They craved solitude, returning to join the rest of the warriors only on those occasions that required them to do so. At festivals, or to fight, or to embark upon the annual springtime trek south to the Gagarians. There was no enmity between the two groups of women. The Queen had no preference in how they lived and did not judge one way of life more favourably than another. Each woman could choose to spend her days living as she preferred, and would therefore fight with all the more determination to preserve that way of life when the time came. By the time they had pitched their bivouacs, the sun had long since sunk below the horizon, and streams of stars glimmered above them. A chorus of cicadas hummed and buzzed, a counterpoint to the chatter of the women. Lying on her back in the grass, her sword by her side, Hippolyte listened. This was her favourite time. The night after a battle had been fought and won. The women could regale their comrades with stories, how their opponents had fought, how close those enemy blades had come, boasting of the mounted attacks they had mastered. The Queen would seal it all away in the back of her mind. They had lost 12 women that day. Nothing, when set against the hundreds of deaths their opponents had suffered, but more than was acceptable. They had brought the bodies with them, wrapped tightly in linen, to be returned to their homes in Pontus. They would perform a proper burial there, committing the women to the land, along with their weapons, and all the honour they deserved. Next time, Hippolyte told herself as the fire sizzled and spat, she would not lose any, and she would offer a greater sacrifice to her father, her immortal father, Ares, the god of war.